Hello there, welcome to the channel, it's great to see you here. Today I want to talk a little bit about compressing acoustic guitar. Acoustic guitar can be one of the more difficult instruments to mix, and I want to talk a little bit about that today. Mainly though, I'm going to concentrate on compression. It's one of the most difficult instruments to mix because it's so dynamic. It's so varied in the way it can be played. You can strum it, you can finger pick it, you can play it in a heavy rock song, you can play it in a soft ballad. And that whole range of performances there can sometimes make it difficult to decide what you might want to do with the acoustic. So today I just want to show you a couple of my go-to compressors that I use for the job, and I've found that over all the mixes I've done over recent years that these two compressors get me the most natural sounding results, and they get me the results quickly. Okay, and I really wanted to share that with you. Sometimes I think that the compressing of acoustic guitars can get a little bit more, I don't know, overthought, if that's a word. Really, I think it's quite a simple thing to do, and it doesn't need much. That's the key, actually. Approaching compression on acoustic guitar with a light touch. That's the way I've found that I can get the most transparent sounding compression. And I'll show you that in a second. If you've followed me for any length of time, you'll know that I will always default to the most simplest route when it comes to processing audio. Simplest in what makes sense to me, and simplest in the application of that method and which plugin I decide to use. And that's very much informed the way that I compress acoustic guitar these days. And by following these a couple of examples, I think you'll find that it will work across any style of music, whether it's aggressive rock or whether it's a ballad, because the key is to just take it slowly, take it gently, and not overdo it. Now, this is just my method, or it's a method I've found that works best for me. It's not the only method or the best. What this is just me wanting to share with you how I go about compressing acoustic guitar. If you find that these methods don't work, then there are a couple of different options you've got, and I'll talk about those later on. The two examples I've got here for you are both strummed, mainly because I couldn't find a finger picking example for this, but rest assured what I'm going to show you will work equally well on finger picked parts. The two tracks that I've got here, the first one is a mono recorded track and the second is a stereo pair. So first I'm just going to look at this mono track, and the first step for me in processing anything is to listen to what we've got and then decide what I want to do with it. Let's do that with this particular acoustic here. Okay, really just straightforward strumming pattern there. What I like to do is actually use my eyes as well as my ears for mixing. Cardinal sin, I know. But what I can see in this capture is, particularly across kind of this section, if you look at the waveform, it's kind of been, not clipped off is the wrong expression, but it's just, you can see that it's been controlled, shall we say. So I'm making the assumption that this has had a compressor on it when it was recorded. And that's really good to know, and it's really good to spot, because as I said at the start of the video, we're just going to use a gentle approach here, because if you start going in hard with acoustics, you start to hear the compression and you lose the natural sound of the acoustic. You lose a lot of the dynamic range. And that's something that I want to try and retain as much of with an acoustic guitar as I can, even in a rock track. But sometimes, you know, you've got to do what you've got to do to get the acoustic to work in any mix. So that's the ultimate test, really, is you just got to do what the mix requires of you to get that part heard. But I'm digressing. I'm really trying not to digress in this video. Look at what you've been given, listen to what you've been given. I'm making the assumption that this has got some compression already applied, so I really only want to go gently here. Why would I want to add more compression? This is exactly what you need to be asking yourself. What is your goal here? Well, for me, as well as controlling dynamics and problem solving, a compressor is about tone, particularly using a character compressor. I just tend to go and enjoy using character compressors as well as EQs, as I'm sure you've seen in other videos. Another aspect or another thing to equip yourself with is knowledge around suitable compressors or proven compressors for certain instruments. For acoustic guitar, for electric guitar, is the LA-3A. What's worth knowing about this is, first of all, it's proven to work brilliantly on acoustic guitar. So, you know, file that away in your memory banks, because that's a decision made, then that's another decision you don't have to think about. Secondly, what I love about this compressor is that you've only got two main controls. There's no attack, no release, no ratio. So if you're not comfortable, you're not really sure how to compress or what you're doing with compression, if you're just starting out, then this is a great option because A, it's proven to work on acoustic guitars. So you can assume that the attack and release and ratio that's kind of built into this type of compressor, which is an optical compressor, that's all automatically taken care of for you. So you don't have to worry about that. So that's another decision you don't have to make. If you want to know more about compressor types, then I'll stick a card up here for you to go away and have a look at that after you've watched this video. That will explain all the different types of compressors and how they work and how they're different to each other. Okay. So I'm not going to get into that in this video. The LA-3A is very closely linked to the LA-2A, which you might be familiar with as well. And the main difference between the two is that the LA-2A is a tube-driven compressor. So you've got all that warmth associated with that tube sound. This, the LA-3A, which came along a little bit later, is more transistor-based. So it's more, it's called a solid-state compressor. What that means is that in the LA-2A, LA-3A case, is that the LA-3A is slightly faster in its operation, and it's got a different tonal character, slightly different tonal character. The LA-3A is known for being a bit more mid-forward, which is great for guitars. The other thing about this compressor is that the attack and the release, it's all variable depending on the input signal, the level of it, the way it's played, the transient nature of it, which is brilliant because, you know, it's like automation built into the box. So when thinking about acoustic guitar, I'm thinking about the sound of the acoustic guitar. Its range covers a huge range of the frequency spectrum. But it's not only about frequencies, it's about transients with acoustics. There is a transient or a percussive element to the sound depending on how it's played. And that transient can either be soft or harsh or sharp. In an acoustic guitar, for example, that would be accentuated with, say, nylon strings versus steel strings, and some of the strings being the way that they're wound can also make a great deal of difference to how the transients sound. And the reason I'm talking about transients is because if the acoustic hasn't been recorded optimally, if it's not been played particularly evenly, then those transients can become a problem in the mix and can be a reason to apply compression, because we can use compression to shave off some of those transient peaks to make the sound much more even. You're able then to bed the acoustic guitar into the mix much more easily because you've not got sharp transients sticking out of the mix every so often randomly, and that just unfortunately highlights maybe a player that's not that experienced, and it just comes off as an uneven, unprofessional sounding mix. So this is why a compressor is a great thing to use on acoustic guitars. Now, I want to kind of caveat that by saying you don't have to do it every time. It totally depends on, as I've said, the player, the instrument, the microphone technique, and a host of other things as to whether you decide you need to use a compressor. And that, whilst you may not know that initially when soloing the instrument and deciding what you want to do with it, it will become apparent once you've got into the mix. And if you're like me and start with drums and move on to bass, you've got that, when you've got those in a really great place and they're sounding strong and powerful, then you start to bring in the guitars, and that really highlights what you need to do with the guitars. And keyboards similarly. Once you've got everything in, you may find you need to go back to an acoustic that may not have needed compression, and you could hear it. Now, once you've got everything in, you're starting to lose it in places. So then you go back. So what I'm saying is, don't worry if you don't initially know what you want to do with the track you're listening to. It will become apparent as the mix develops. For the purposes of this video though, I've got some isolated tracks to demonstrate compression for you. So this acoustic, where I have digressed and gone off on a tangent. I'll come back to this acoustic now. We saw that just by using our eyes, and you can kind of tell by zooming out more than anything, that this probably has had some sort of compressor on it. So we want to go in with another compressor gently. In this case, it may not be for tightening up the dynamic range as such, but maybe it's about the characteristic of the compressor. Adding a little bit more mid-forwardness in this case, and maybe helping the energy of the part just feel a little bit more forward so that it can hold its own amongst with electric guitars, for example. Okay, let's listen to this track. Okay, so what I hear there then, it's not as bright as I would like. I feel as though it could have a little bit more zing to it. And also I feel as though the low mids might be a little bit thick sounding. So I just want to instantiate this EQ just to clean that up a little bit. And in this EQ, I'm just going in at 100 Hertz with some dynamic control, using a low cut filter at 60. I'm pulling out a little bit of boxiness that I can hear as well at 500, and then just using a boost at 1400 and at 5.8K, just to bring a little bit more clarity to the sound of the guitar before I start adding compression, because that's the first thing I notice. Okay. That heavy downstroke there just feels like it gets a bit thick sounding. So with the EQ, I feel as though I've controlled that. So we've got the LA-3A. I've taken the peak reduction all the way down to 0 initially. That's not how it defaults open. It defaults open to peak reduction of 5 and gain of 5. What I want to try and do is keep this level matched as best I can as we go through this. Let's start getting some peak reduction in. Peak reduction is gain reduction, dynamic range squeezing. This is compressed already. So what I'm listening for is if I can enhance this sound a little bit more. Now that I've controlled the low mids somewhat, and they're not so uneven in the way that the guitar has been played by using the EQ. Now I can try and bring a bit more of that controlled warmth back through the tone of the compressor. What I'm looking for is more body, really, and I want to hear more energy from the strums that aren't quite as powerful as the main kind of accented strums. Okay, so there's not very much compression happening there, only -1 dBs of gain reduction. And I feel that that is, for this part that's got compression on it already, I don't think that going any more than that is really going to help. That it's just going to sound overcompressed to me, and that's so easy to do with acoustics. It's also quieter. I can hear the dynamics, it's more even sounding, but I need to make up the gain here to get this sounding, get it back to where it was before we started. So that feels pretty level matched. Let's see if we can do an A-B comparison now with an extended listen. If I bypass this compressor and then we'll bring it in. It's a very subtle, very gentle compression. Let's try a little bit more compression on this part. Okay, so I think you can hear that more clearly there, and you can certainly hear how the body of the acoustic guitar feels more present. And that'll just make it easier to sit in the mix. The attack time on the LA-3A is variable. The ratio is said to be around about 3:1 on these compressors. The attack time is fast, but it's not super fast, say as a 1176. And the reason I'm talking about attack time is because that is the parameter that, if you can control it manually, that's what you can use to shape that transient. It's all dependent on how loud and the quality or the type of sound going into these compressors as to how the attack and the release work. And that's one of the downsides, is that you don't have that extra control that you would with an 1176. To demonstrate the control that you can apply to the transients of an acoustic guitar, I want to show you this stock compressor that comes with Pro Tools, because you get the actual, you're able to change the attack and the release time continuously. The attack is set pretty slow here, the release is set kind of medium, I guess. But let's talk about the scenario where you might have a particularly harsh sounding guitar, scrapey sounding, and it's just popping out of the mix unevenly. Let's just listen to this part now and listen for the sharpness of the pick on the strings, the zinginess of the strings. What I might do actually is just go back to the EQ and maybe exaggerate that a little bit. Okay, so that's just to help you hear that metallic nature. Let's get this compressor compressing a little bit then. Okay, I just want to speed up the release a little bit so you don't kind of hear the compression so obviously. Now let's go in then and just speed up this attack to try and catch some of that metallic sound. See if you can hear it soften. Okay. So you can hear it soften there. You can hear the release as well. You can just hear the compression. You know, it's not transparent at all. But what I'm trying to demonstrate to you is that a faster attack reduces the harsh nature of the transients. Okay, way too much compression, but hopefully that will allow you to hear that difference there in the character of the transients. Now for me, what I like to do is rather than rely on just a compressor to control those transients, I will use other tools as well in combination with a compressor because that gives me the most natural sounding result. So that would involve using tape. It would also involve using EQ, maybe a multiband compressor to react and reduce some of the high frequencies of those transients. Then we would get the compressor, and then following that might even go to saturation to smooth them out even more. So it's chipping away a little bit, fraction by fraction, using multiple tools rather than expecting a compressor to give you a transparent result. And that's what I found has worked best for me. But the LA-3A, my recommendation for you today, just takes all that guesswork away from you because you know it's proven to work on guitars, so therefore the way it handles the attack automatically just takes that decision away from you. So let's move on to the next example that I want to give you. And this example is my favourite compressor to use. I'll try the LA-3A because that has got a slightly faster attack. But if I feel as though the guitar sounds great, natural, I don't particularly feel as though it's got any terrible transient quality to it, then my go-to is the Manley Vari-Mu. So the LA-3A is an optical type compressor. The Manley Vari-Mu is a Vari-Mu style compressor, or a variable mu. This type of compressor, if you've not got a Manley, then you could use Fairchild. That is also a Vari-Mu style compressor. A really great alternative, actually, to the Manley Vari-Mu is the Klanghelm MJ-UC compressor. Really cheap, but really good quality. If you don't happen to have a Manley, then try the MJ-UC, which works brilliantly. The main thing you'll notice is we've got a lot more controls with this compressor, which is one of the reasons I like to use it. It just gives me a little bit more flexibility We've got the attack here, which at the moment is set to a medium position, and we've got recovery, which is the release, which is set to fast. So with the attack, since we've just been talking about attack, we've got fast or slow. If we look at the UAD website, it tells us that the faster you set the attack, the more rapidly compression is applied to the signal above the threshold. But at its range on the Manley Vari-Mu is continuously variable, so it's forever changing. It goes from 70 milliseconds when it's set to slow to 25 milliseconds when it's set to fast, okay? And you can recall that in the previous example, I was going down to kind of 15 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds on the attack, so very fast. And that's in order so that I could demonstrate the transient shaping capabilities. But this the Vari-Mu doesn't go as fast as that, and it's not as fast as the LA-3A either. I've seen varying figures for the attack times on LA-3A, and I don't know which one is correct, so I'm just going to say it's faster. Another great compressor, if you want that fine control and you need a faster response, is the 1176. But this is my go-to. It sounds natural to me. It processes the signal nice and gently, transparently, which is key. You see the recovery knob values here. We've got it set to fast, so that is kind of 0.2 seconds. The acoustic that I'm going to talk about now is a stereo recording. 2 microphones, panned, hard left and hard right. I don't think it's an XY recording. I think this is a spaced pair, because this, just by looking at the waveforms there, left to right. So if I solo the left, and the right, the right side sounds louder than the left. And that's the two of them together. I've got tape machine, and I've got a multi-band compressor in place just to help with the tonality of this guitar. So it's hardly touching the high frequencies at all. What it is doing is controlling the low mids. And that's before going into the compressor. This part is a bit more dynamically played than the previous part. In terms of gain reduction for the LA-3A, I really wouldn't go anywhere above kind of -3 for an acoustic guitar that has been recorded without compression. And maybe the peaks, maybe the odd peak can go up to -4, -5, because it will be so dynamic. So I would say aim for kind of -3 to -5 on the LA-3A for acoustic guitar that's not been compressed. Where it has been compressed, use as little as possible and just use it for its tonal qualities and to just bolster the body of the guitar a little bit more, and maybe just soften off a few transients. But in this case, this is a little bit different, this track. You can also see, again, mixing with my eyes and not my ears, that the first part of that, the strumming, is a little bit more loud or vigorous than the last part. So there's definitely more of a movement across this whole performance than the previous example. So we just want to look to even that out a little bit more, again, for the purpose of making it easier to sit in the mix and use less automation. I also want to see if we can do something with the tone. This compressor does have tubes in it, unlike the LA-3A. So this is going to help with tone, the warmth aspect of it. There's also a transformer in this particular signal path as well, which is going to help with, you know, a few nice harmonics maybe. So by boosting the input here, this dual input, I'm sending more signal into the tubes to just give a little bit more colour. Let's just bring this in It's at the moment, it won't be compressing. Well, the threshold is up at its maximum. The attack, let's just set that more back to a medium setting. But we know that the fastest setting is 25 milliseconds. So medium is obviously, you know, somewhere between 25 and 70 milliseconds. So it's not going to be touching the transient particularly. Let's just switch this in initially. Okay, feels like it's reasonably level matched. So let's start getting some compression on this part. Now that compression is happening, the signal's a little bit quieter if I bypass it. So I just want to bring that up a little bit. And you can already start to hear the difference there between the compressed and the uncompressed signal. Just starts to close the gap for me between the lesser accented strums and the more heavily played strums. And you can hear the body of the guitar come up because of that, because the dynamic range of the different strum intensities has been brought closer together, gives the perception that the body has increased, and it just makes the guitar feel a little bit more energetic and bigger in size. We've got this section here with the loud strums, so we go from more rapid strumming into single strums. And you can see there's some gain reduction happening on the single strums, about 1 dB. I don't go above 2 dBs of gain reduction on acoustic guitar with this compressor. So by just having the lesser strums there being attenuated by 1 dB, it's kind of retaining some dynamics there between the two parts, but it is bringing them closer together for the sake of the mix. What you need to know about the Vari-Mu, the manly Vari-Mu, is that the compression ratio, which you see you don't have control of, because that's an omission that you'll notice on the front panel here. There's no ratio control. On the manly, the ratio is only 1.5 to 1. Okay, so that's half the value of the LA-3A. So this is a much more gentle approach to acoustic to give you that more natural feel. So, you know, 1.5 to 1 ratio in compressed mode with only 2 dBs of gain reduction. That's very gentle, but I really honestly think that is all you need for acoustic. It's really easy for it to sound overcompressed, and I think using either one of these compressors, the LA-3A or the Vari-Mu, is the safest option, really, particularly if you are not comfortable with attack and release times on compressors. The Vari-Mu is going to allow the transients to come through relatively unscathed, again playing into that natural sounding acoustic. So the application of this does greatly depend on the quality of the recording that you're working with. And that's the caveat, that's the kind of get out clause with any of these YouTube tutorials, is it really does all depend on the quality of the recording that you're working with as to how you approach processing, not just compression, but EQ and anything. So if you feel as though you have been struggling to mix acoustics that you have recorded yourself, maybe you need to go back and perhaps refresh your knowledge around recording acoustic guitars, or gain some new knowledge around recording acoustic guitars, and try and get it right there, because it would just be so much easier then for it to work in your mixes. Now, I don't have that opportunity. I don't record music that much, well, not at all these days, but I do mix it often and mix other people's music often. And I work with coaching clients and work with their music. And so I'm able to come up with these more troubleshooting, problem-solving approaches to recordings that might not be as clean or as smooth as they could. And I found that these two compressors work pretty much most of the time. And if I need something faster in terms of controlling that transient aspect, then I'll try something more like the 1176 to see if I can shave off a bit more of the transient. But like I said before, though, I don't like to do it all with a compressor. I do like to do that sort of correction using multiple tools. There are other ways to compress acoustic guitar. People have got their own styles that make sense to them and have worked for them, and this is just the way that I found works for me. Another approach that I've seen people use, and I have used from time to time, but I'm not a big fan of it, and that is using serial compression. So using two compressors in series, one after the other. The first one catching the peaks with, say, a fast attack and a fast release, and then using a second compressor to really smooth out and do more of a general compression. And whilst that works and does give you more control over the transient peaks, if you're not entirely sure what you're doing, it can result in overcompression. But if you are comfortable with compressors, then please, by all means, go ahead and try that. It might work for you. Parallel compression is another approach with acoustic guitar. If you feel as though you need to do that, that might be something you would need to do in a more busy arrangement, in a rock mix or something along those lines, where you've got stacks of vocals, stacks of electrics and keyboards. Parallel compression on acoustic can really help bring up the body of the acoustic and hear more of the note, of the tone of the acoustic in amongst everything else. So that's another great approach that you can try out. Today, though, I just wanted to bring you the easy options, my easy go-to first try options with regard to compressing acoustics. And then if you want to learn more about those more advanced approaches, then maybe you can let me know in the comments and I'll do a follow-up video. So let me know in the comments, what's your favourite compressor for acoustic guitar? I'd love to know. I'd also love to know what your favourite technique is. Maybe it is using serial compression. I'd really like to know. So drop your comment down below and share it with the rest of the community. So I hope you found this video useful. I just think it's a really simple way to apply compression to acoustic guitars using those two character compressors and not falling into the trap of overthinking attack and release times. So I really wanted to share that with you. Now, if you'd like to know more about how I compress vocals, then I'm going to drop a link in the description below to a PDF that you can download where I go into detail about how I compress vocals. If you think you might find that interesting, grab the link, grab the guide, and have fun with it. So you saw me using dynamic EQ in this demonstration. If you'd like to learn more about dynamic EQ and multiband compressors, which one you should use and what the differences are, then check out this video on screen now, and I'll go through each type and why you might want to choose one over the other. So that's all from me. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.